Hello, my name is Mardi and welcome back to my channel. I don't read a lot of popular books these days. I used to do that a little bit more, but the thing is I often don't like them. A lot of the time they don't live up to the hype, in my opinion. And I will do a different video about books that I just didn't like. But to start with a little bit of positivity, because it's summer and it's unbelievably warm. And we finally got sun, even in West Germany. I decided to start with the books that I did actually enjoy. And maybe see this as like my summer reading recommendations of this year, because I don't read a lot of books that fall into the summery category, so I want to make a video for that. I do use quite a wide definition of popular books, mostly because I feel like depending on which part of the internet you're on, very different books will be popular. There's also a range of genres, as always. There's no non-fiction, because the only popular non-fictions I know about are like mostly self-improvement books, and I don't really read those, or I don't read those at all. So I don't have any non-fiction books for you today. I do have 10 fiction books, and also one honorable mention. The first two Murderbot Diaries books, the first two books in the Murderbot Diaries series by Martha Wells. Those were pretty good. I haven't read the rest of the series. I am intending to use the first one of those for a different recommendation video, and so to not get repetitive, I decided to not include it here. With that being said, I think that's all I have to say for this introduction. We start with Six of Crows. We follow a bunch of teens, essentially. So there's Cass, he is this famous criminal. There's Inej, his right-hand woman. Cass gets a contract to raid, is it a prison? I think it's a prison. He gets, what does it say on here? Ice Court, it's not a prison. He gets the chance to, a deadly haste, break into the Ice Court, a military stronghold that has never been breached, and retrieve a hostage whose knowledge could change Grisha magic forever. To succeed would mean riches beyond his wildest dreams, but he can't pull it off alone. This was popular a while ago on Booktube. It's pretty YA. It's, I think, the most YA book that I would still say is a good book, because I'm not really into YA these days anymore. We have a lot of tropes that I enjoyed. Found family, the first among them. These are just a bunch of basically kids that don't really fit together at first, but they somehow make it, and they somehow go on this big journey, because they have to first travel to the Ice Court. And I mean, I really enjoy journey stories anyway. And then the humor in this was just, it was on the verge of being kind of childish, but it really fit so well with the characters. It made so much sense for these characters to have this kind of humor, and we also see a lot of character development. We see a lot of their background stories, especially Cass. But also I really enjoyed Michael's background. Michael is a character that at first is more of an enemy to the others. And he at first doesn't really want to go with them. He has his own plans, his own ideas about what should be done. But then we kind of see the change of him going from really not liking these people to joking with them. And I really enjoy those things in books, when you have a character that goes from absolutely not wanting to be with other people to actually kind of enjoying the company. This is pretty good and lived up to its hype. The next one is less popular on Booktube, I think, or BookTok or Bookstagram, and more in like the general public. I've heard about this a lot, at least. It had a movie adaptation. It's The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I have the German edition that came out after the movie was shot, which means that there are pictures of the movie inside. I read this the first time. Oh, when did the movie come out? I must have read it pretty much exactly after the movie came out. I think it would have been 2014. So I would have been 11. It does have some serious themes, It plays in World War II. Liesel is brought to a strange family by her mom to live there during World War II. Her brother dies at the start of the book, and at his funeral we see Liesel steal her first book. Books kind of become her fixation point. She starts stealing books. We, as a reader, focus less on the book stealing and more on what she sees during World War II, which is why I'm saying that this has some pretty serious themes. We see Jews being walked through the city where Liesel lives. We see bombs falling, and especially the end is not for the faint of heart. What really intrigued me about this book from the start is the way it's told. The narrator is deaf, like the person deaf. And he talks about Liesel like about an old friend. But he has this way of describing things that is just really colorful, maybe. And it brings a voice to a girl who lives through World War II, even though she doesn't once tell her own side of the story. As I said, I don't think this is actually that popular on the internet. And you always see it on lists like top 100 books to read in your life. But I almost never see anyone actually talk about it. And I think that's a shame, because this is a really good emotional book and I have reread it so many times. This has somehow accompanied me throughout my entire teens. I read it so many times. I think I read it almost every year until I moved out. It's a good book. It's so good. I think more people should actually read it and not just put it on top 100 books to read lists. The next one I actually only read once, and I also only read it last year, I think. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I haven't read the other two books, and I mean no one has read. Wait, is it 2 books that are out and the 4th book is still missing? No one has read the last book as far as I know. The main character's name is Quoth, which I just read from the back. I do not remember main character names, but I do remember that he grew up in a wandering circus and he learned to play the guitar. I don't remember if he learned it in the circus or afterwards. His family and the entire circus, I think, is killed at some point, except him, and he escapes. He starts living on the streets and he starts begging for food, and so on and so forth. And then he somehow manages to get into the academy. I don't quite remember how he does it. He's also trying to get into the guild of musicars or something. He plays the guitar extremely well. I don't actually think we see much more after that. Maybe we do and I just have forgotten about it entirely. So why do I still think that it wasn't underrated, even if I don't remember anything about it? Well, the language was amazing. And for me, just because I don't remember a plot doesn't mean that the plot wasn't extremely well written. It just means that I can't remember things. But I remember the feeling I had reading this, and this was literally, I think, the only thing that could pull me out of the stress at the time, because I was so stressed when I read this. The entire time I was just under constant pressure, and this was the only distraction that really helped. I think this was the only thing I could read without constantly thinking and rethinking about my university works. So this is why I think this still lives up to the hype, even though I don't remember quite a lot about the plot itself, and should definitely reread it at some point before I read the second book, though that's not gonna happen anytime near the future. I also remember the language quite well. I remember that the language sounded very magical. So one of the quotes, and I do have my little notebook here because I can't remember things. One of the quotes is, "Only priests and fools are fearless, and I've never been on the best of terms with God." And you had a lot of quotes like that in here. Another one is, "Tradition, my boy, and superstition, they are one and the same anyway." Or, "Etiquette is a set of rules people use so they can be rude to each other in public." There's so many good sentences in this book, and I really enjoy a book with good writing. I also did quite like Quoth. I liked that we saw her struggles. I liked that we saw the times when he maybe wasn't the best guy in the universe. There's also, I don't think it's actually a side plot. I think it's more of the main plot, except basically the story of Grove is told by someone to some other people. So it's told to a chronicler, but there's also this village where suddenly a monster appears. And there's this mystery behind basically the present time, like what is happening in this village and who are these people and who's the pub owner, who is his friend. There are some secrets concerning the present, but we don't really get to see too much of that in this book yet. I'm assuming we're gonna see it in part 2. Okay, let's continue with a classic, shall we? Since we have talked about everything except classics so far. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Fantastic book. I don't always like every classic I read. I think it is fine to not like classic books. We all have different tastes. But this was amazing. We followed Dorian Gray, who gets obsessed with his youth and his beauty and has a picture painted, and then he just doesn't seem to age. He meets a man called Henry Wotton, who tempts him into bad decisions, and who's definitely part of Dorian Gray's moral ethics eroding. However, of course, Dorian Gray is still the man who makes the decisions, so we also see just him being a questionable person. He falls in love with a young woman. There is something I have to say about this book that I did not like. I know it's, a product of the time. There is anti-Semitic language in here, as in, I think every classic has racist and anti-Semitic and sexist language and so on. But still, it bears saying it's a classic. It will have ideas of people that we don't agree with anymore today, as a general rule. We also see Dorian Gray's friend Basil, who paints the picture of Dorian Gray, if I remember correctly, and he's very disappointed, I think, by the change he sees in his friend. He's also, this was written by Oscar Wilde, who probably was part of the most famous case against, I think, sodomy is what they called it, so the crime of homosexuality at the time, and honestly it probably had his popularity. So there are definitely a lot of gay undertones. This is not a queer story. There is no gay couple in here. There are some undertones that you can read out of it if you want to. Also if you don't want to, I think. I enjoyed this book mostly because of, honestly, in this case the plot, which doesn't happen very often. I don't often enjoy plots. I do enjoy plots, but it's not the main thing for me. Usually, for me, the most important thing are the characters, and then the language, and then the plot. Actually, the world building comes before the plot. So you can really give me an empty book as long as the characters are fun. I will have the time of my life. In this case, I really liked the plot. I think it was well made. I think it was interesting to follow. Often with classics I have the feeling that nothing happens, and that is fine, as I don't really need anything to happen, but it can also bore me quite a lot. In this case it didn't. I also did quite like the morally grey characters of especially Henry, but also of Dorian Gray himself. The language isn't really anything special, I think. I don't remember anything from it that would bear pointing out, but it is definitely a fun book. It was a 5-star for me at the time, I think. I might have to reread this as well. A lot of these books I haven't read in a while, so I definitely should reread a lot of them. But this one, if you're looking for a classic this summer, this is worth it. Next I will recommend an entire series to you. I'm pretty sure I read it in one summer, except there has been a new book coming out this year, and also apparently I missed the short story collection, though I don't know how that happened. I'm talking about the Witcher books by Andrzej Sapkowski, a Polish author, so I read them in German. They made them, or they remade the covers when the Netflix series came out, so the German ones all have an animal on the front, and then the spine actually aligns into a picture, which is quite nice. It also has a nice feeling to it. The main story, we follow Geralt and Ciri. Ciri, who is the adoptive daughter of Geralt, who used to be a princess, but due to a war she isn't anymore, and Geralt, who is a witcher, who witchers hunt magical creatures, monsters really, that ravage towns or are a danger to the wider public. They are enhanced by mutations. They can also take certain potions to enhance themselves even more. And they're just living on the path during the year, and then in winter they will winter at Kaer Morhen. I read a lot of fan fictions, which is probably why I remember so many details as opposed to other stories and other books. Ciri, the princess who's not a princess anymore, she disappears. She also joins a band. No, band is the German word I would use. A group of young criminals who mostly, I think, are thieves, but they also have no issues with murdering someone. And Geralt, as well as his lover, not lover, on-off lover, Yennefer, go look for Ciri. That is the story, the main story, I would say. There's also a lot of political intrigue, there's a lot of magic in this. It's more on the darker side, I would say. It's not gory, but it's not one of those fairy feel-good magic stories. It's more of a dark winter stories. It would probably be a vibe to read this in winter. But honestly, I don't care when to read books, so you can read them in summer as well. I'm not a seasonal reader, really. I really enjoyed these because I think at the time I had mostly read a lot of fantasy books that were, while also medieval, kinda. I read mostly medieval fantasies, if that makes sense. They didn't have the same dark feeling to it, or the same, not dark in pitch black dark sense of the word, but more a dark greyish, a little bit dirty vibe. Did I read them during COVID? I didn't read. I must have read them the year I graduated. Anyway, I was 18. Let's say I was 18. And I had only really read a lot of extremely magical focused books, but the magic was often like nature magic or, you know, the typical wizard magic. This was new for me, and that is part of why I enjoyed it. I also did enjoy the more grown-up language at the time. Again, I had read a lot of books too early in my life, but a lot of the books I read too early were more, I don't know, today we would maybe call them new adult books. They are not a good idea to read when you were 12. This felt more grown up, but not new adult grown up, which of course it's absolutely valid to read those. But it felt more like a book my parents would maybe read, or I don't know, someone older than me. And at 18, that was the first time I came into contact with this type of grown-up book. Let's go with another classic, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I don't have a Frankenstein book. I read it in this edition, which is called Classic Works from Women Writers. Which publisher is it? Canterbury Classics. I quite like this book. It's got like gold foiling, and it has a lot of different stories in it. For example, also something like The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, some poetry by the Bronte sisters, and here we are, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I think the plot of Frankenstein should be pretty well known. A doctor creates a new person out of body parts, the new person comes to life, the doctor abandons the new person and calls it a monster, like Frankenstein's monster, and then this monster actually follows Frankenstein and kind of like follows him to his life and tries to figure out who he is, what he is, what's his purpose. I think a lot of us have more of like this green image of Frankenstein in the head with, you know, a scar above here where it has its brains, and a little bit more of a stupid Frankenstein monster. Frankenstein's monster is actually immensely smart. It's so intelligent. It teaches itself, first of all, at least 2 languages, I think. It also somehow follows Frankenstein and looks at his life. It's very compassionate. It helps a farm family. Or I'm not quite sure what pronouns to use here. I think he uses him. he, him pronouns. So let's go with he. So he is really a quite intelligent person, but he was abandoned, and that obviously marks him. And I do think that the original story is worth it, because the image we have in our head of Frankenstein's monster is quite different from what it actually is. And I think that it brings up a very important discussion of what happens when we bring something into life but don't care for it, and what happens when we make new inventions. It looks at... It's honestly a very modern story, in the sense that to this day we always have to ask what happens when we actually bring something new into the world, be it, you know, an actual human being. Can we care for it? It talks a little bit about the idea of nature versus nurture that I quite enjoy, but also new technologies, now with AI, or new possibilities of new weapons, mass destruction, will be honestly pretty present in the future. And this is, in a sense, a very important story even today, because the world is changing so quickly and we have to make sure that we take care of it. And this is a story that shows it so well. And also, I honestly just like Frankenstein's monster. I think he's an interesting guy. I think him just teaching himself, I think it was French, some language, him wanting this connection, it shows that a human being wants connections, even if it is seen as not worthy of connections by others. It's very lonely as well in places. It's extremely emotional, and you feel so much for this supposed monster, and in the end maybe the monster isn't the monster but the human. That was a great sentence. I should end it on this one. We have another huge book on the list, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I do remember this time a lot about the plot. It's just that it's a lot. Because I mean, it's like, how many pages? Like over 800 pages. And it's filled with plot. It's not one of those things where nothing happens for 800 pages. A lot of things happen. So we have a queen, and her power is kind of in the ropes. Do you say that in English? It's kind of on you know, on the brink maybe, because she doesn't have an heir yet. This is, I think it's a matriarchy, that it's always said. So she would need a female heir, best case scenario. She doesn't have an heir yet. She does have a seemingly loyal chambermaid, friend, guard. I'm not entirely sure what she was. She did have a job very close to the queen, and this person, this woman, seems very loyal, except she is in reality part of the Priory of the Orange Tree and is loyal to that. It has a lot of political intrigue. There is the best friend of the queen who at some points goes out to a mission, and I don't want to say too much about it, but that almost made me cry, and I don't cry at books. There's also a poet in here. I love poets in my books. So there's a lot of things going on. There's also a sapphic love story, which is a bonus, because how many sapphic love stories do we really get in books? None. I saw it around a lot before I read it, and I honestly did not expect to like it as much as I did, even though I am big on fantasy and I usually really love any fantasy book. In this case, however, I was scared by the size, and I was scared by how little I seem to know about the plot, even though I had seen it everywhere, and I think that's what's happening right now, that it has so much, but also it's just so full on how do I explain it. So I was scared going into this, but I was really pleasantly surprised, and I couldn't even tell you why it was immersive, because it's not like the language was especially grand, or to be honest, I think it was the characters. 99% of the time, let's say 90% of the time, or let's say 80% of the time, for me it's characters. 50% of the time it's either world building or language, and 5% of the time it's the plot. In this case it was definitely characters. I enjoyed the poet too much, I think. I think it was mostly the poet. I like poetry in my books. Give me a book with a bard or a troubadour or a poet or a musician and show me their creative process, show me how they come up with their lines, and I love it. I also did really like the Queen at some point. In the beginning I didn't like her. I thought she was a little bit too, I don't know, she just seemed like the typical queen who always worries about getting finally an heir, and that just annoys me sometimes. But the more we got into it, the more political intrigue we saw, and the more we saw what a smart character she actually was. We also saw her love to certain people, and it was really an enjoyable read. I do still have oh, it's down here, the I think it's a prequel, A Day or Fall Night by Samantha Shannon. What annoys me is that it's not the same size, like the same height as this book. It's like this much taller. It's down here. I still haven't read it. I've been wanting to read it for years, but I think it will take a while because it's big. Next we have a more experimental book. I say experimental because it's not a book where you have text and you just read the text. It has a lot of different elements to it. For example, you will have these little rectangles here, and then sometimes you will have to turn the book around. I know a lot of people find it exhausting because it doesn't really tell you how to read it. It doesn't tell you what part of the page to look at first. You have to figure that out for yourself, but I think it makes for a very unique experience because all of us will read it somehow differently. It also, because of like all of the different ways that it's written, also correspond to different people that we follow and different. It's really, I think it's like 2 or 3 plots put into one book. We have, for one, this filmmaker who has decided to kind of escape from his previous life and is now making a documentation about a strange house. We have a guy who, I think he's lost his eyesight or his hearing or something, and who's now just I think he goes through a book or something and is trying to figure out a mystery. So this is really 2 or 3 books wrapped into one, if we're being honest. And I think the biggest reason it is quite chilling at times, especially the parts with the house. If you've seen this one horror movie, what is it? Halloween House. I think it's supposed to be for kids. I find that Halloween House movie pretty scary, even as an adult. I read it in the midst of summer and felt like it was beginning of November, because this book made me so... It kind of made me scared, honestly. I wouldn't read it late in the evening, actually, because I knew that then I wouldn't be able to sleep, because I would just imagine my room turning around me. And to be fair, it was sometimes a little bit exhausting to read because of the different ways it is written and because of the changing font, because of so many words on a page, and you have to figure out how to read it. It can be exhausting, but it's so worth it. It feels like every single thing that was done inside of this book has been thought through 10 times. This guy must be the biggest overthinker of the century, because everything had a meaning, everything made sense. Even the empty pages, that sometimes you will get a page where there's only one word on it. Even those were so scary for some reason. So yeah, every single thing in this seemed like it made so much sense to do it in that exact place. I did not see any of the twists coming. I enjoyed the language. He uses very different language for very different characters and very different plot points. It was a great read. It is a very big read as well. He also, I just see, this book does have a glossary in the back. That's interesting for a fiction book. We have The Final Empire. I think I spoke about this kind of recently because I am planning on reading the 3rd book pretty soon, hopefully. This is the first one, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first book I ever read by him. He has an enormous bibliography at this point. He writes like 2 books a year, and I like, how are you supposed to catch up? In the first book we follow mostly Vin, who is a young girl growing up among criminals. You might see a theme here with my favorite fantasy books. I do like my misfits. She lives in a world where ash is falling from the sky. The bad guy has won. That's the idea behind it. The bad guy, I think he calls him the Lord Ruler. He has won, and now he rules the world, or at least the country. There is a suppressed people called the Scar, and then there are people who can use metals to gain certain powers, and certain metals will correspond to a specific power. Very few people, called Mistborn, can consume all the metals and therefore gain all of the powers. These can include being extremely strong or pushing yourself away from metals, meaning you can kind of fly because the entire city is made up from different metals. It's, in my opinion, kind of a unique magic system, which I enjoyed. We also have Kelsia, who takes Finn in and figures out that she is actually a Mistborn, and also then trains her. But his actual plan is an uprising, and for that he needs his... He collects a group of friends, well, they're not friends in the beginning, but they become friends, to plan the uprising. It's so fun. Again, I love my misfits. I love my uprising by a bunch of people who don't actually fit that well together. I love reading stories about people that are on the outskirts of society. And this was so fun. It had a lot of twists. There were some things that I found annoying. I don't like people coming back from death. It's one of my pet peeves in books. But still, I think, considering it's like almost 600 pages, I got through this so quickly as well. In this case, I think a lot of things come together that just fit perfectly. The language is perfectly chosen for this kind of book. It's not too flowery, but it's also not too direct. The characters we meet are they're all so different from each other. They all have their own voices. They all have their own aims and their own fears. And the plot was fun. It's not the most innovative plot there is. I do like the idea that the bad guy has won. However, we don't really see a lot of what happened before. So we only see that he is in power. We don't see the previous uprising that tried to stop him. But it's a good plot. It's, I think a good old uprising. You can't really go wrong with that in most cases. It's a good read if you're really into fantasy, but are kind of bored by the typical medieval setting and the typical magic systems, because this one isn't really, the magic system really isn't that standard. I do like the whole idea of consuming certain metals and then gaining those powers. I do think that there are some things that are maybe a little bit too powerful, and that maybe it would have made sense to do something else with it. We also do later learn in the second book. I really love the second book, by the way, as well, because there's a very specific character that is mad, and I like my crazy mad characters so much. We learn later a little bit more about the magic system that gives it even more depth and even more... It kind of has an innovative energy to it that I don't really see a lot. Okay, we are finally at the last book, and the last book is my favorite classic out there. And I know that not everyone will agree with me, but I think that Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is still honestly the standard for detective stories. Does any of it make sense? No. Does his science actually work out? No, not at all. Like, don't believe anything that is written in these stories, because that's not how it works most of the time. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did not have any clue about chemistry, I think. And also he was very into the occult, wasn't he? I think that the Sherlock Holmes books, which I honestly only read because of the BBC series Sherlock, they are amazing. They are kind of honestly simply written. It's not hard to get into them. They don't use... Sometimes with classics you have these old languages. I actually first started reading Sherlock Holmes in German, and I cannot recommend that. because the German translation use old language. This one feels way more modern. I think there are like 4 main novels, and then there's a lot of short stories. I didn't care too much for many of the short stories, but I really like the relationship between Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, who move in together to save money, and then John Watson starts talking about Sherlock Holmes because Sherlock Holmes is a really weird guy. He's an extremely intelligent guy, but then sometimes he just doesn't know certain things that seem obvious to others. He doesn't really have a lot of general knowledge, but he does have a lot of extremely specific knowledge that he can only use once in a lifetime or never. And they go around and start solving crimes together. Or Sherlock Holmes solves the crimes and John Watson really is more of a talking board for him to bounce back some ideas, if we're being honest. But they develop a very interesting friendship, a deep friendship. I mean, there is a reason why people have always kind of shipped them. And I do like my male friendships. I think we don't have enough deep male friendships in books that are really just about being friends and about being there for each other, and that is what this kinda does. Even though the focus is not necessarily on the relationship between the two people, but really more on Sherlock Holmes, but we can just read their appreciation for each other. Considering it's set in Victorian times, I think from the language they use to address each other, I think Holmes says, "My dear Watson," and they're calling each other by the first name. Of course they live together, but I think considering this place or set in Victorian times, because I think that's when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle also lived, I think it's a very intimate friendship, and I quite enjoy intimate friendships anyway. Again, the crimes don't make any sense a lot of the time. I think the way this was published was in newspapers, maybe. I don't think it was published intended as a series to be read for hundreds of years. I know that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually quite despised his own work with this book and preferred his other books, which I don't even know the titles of. There are a lot of issues concerning names of characters that seem to switch around, and some things that don't really add up. So don't go into this expecting everything to be perfect. I do think that this one definitely has its place as one of the best classics of all time, even though it does have flaws, or maybe because it has flaws. It's so fun to have a classic where you're like, well, this classic, it's really not, it's technically, like the technique behind it might not be the best ever, and there's probably detective stories that have been thought through way better than this one. But this is still a classic just because it's enjoyable, and just because people were like, well, this is a lot of leisure reading. It's not to make myself appear the smartest person in the world, but just to sit down and relax. And that is the fun behind Sherlock Holmes, I think, that it's one of those classics where you're like, I don't read this because I need to get something out of it, I need to understand something that someone has told me. I read it because I wanna have a nice evening. So those were the 10 books that I think deserve the hype. If you agree with me, I'm quite happy. If you don't agree with me, tell me which ones you maybe didn't like. Also tell me maybe which other books you think live up to what everyone has been saying. I don't read a lot of popular books anymore. A lot of popular books also that I see on especially on Bookstagram, but also sometimes still on Booktube, are more new adult or young adult, and that's not what I read at the moment. I used to enjoy young adult quite a lot. I don't anymore, mostly because I think I have just kind of grown out of it. I also feel like it's become sometimes a little bit repetitive. I don't like a lot of these male love interests that are supposed to be dark and in reality are just toxic and also want to hurt people. Anyway, that is the topic of a different video. I will be making a video about popular books I hated. You will get to see that as well at some point, hopefully very soon. Thank you for watching this video, and I will get back to you as soon as I have done the other video.